Welcome to 4 Oak Street. This morning I had a comment back from Rob Wilson, who's asked me just to show how I solder the droppers, which I must admit I'm quite delighted for somebody seeking my expertise. I do not for 1 minute think that I'm an expert at soldering, but one thing that I did do is get some advice quite a while ago when DCC Concepts were actually based in Perth. So I'd sort of followed my dad's lead, whereby I was using Baker's soldering fluid and just a basic solder that you'd use for pretty much anything. So when I mentioned this to Richard, he was quite horrified and told me that the Baker's soldering fluid would probably rot all the track. So I had to come back, and the bit that I'd done I had to wash down with soap and whatever. And while I was there, he suggested a few things that I would need if I was going to build a model railway. And, his advice has been really good. And I must point out that I'm not sponsored by DCC Concepts. But the first thing he suggested was that I invest in a pair of these. So these have got crimping ability, plus great for stripping wires of all sizes, so I do get a lot of use of those. Also these track cutters. Now I don't actually use them to cut track, but I do use them to trim all sorts of things, and they are quite valuable. I use a Dremel for my track. One of the other things he suggested was that I use their flux as opposed to the Baker soldering fluid. So I got this one while I was in England, because obviously they've moved to the UK. This is their original version. They've obviously changed the bottles now, but flux makes everything work great, obviously. And the other thing that he suggested was this tip reviver. So I'm using a 15 watt $25 soldering iron. Now on my list is to buy a better soldering iron with temperature control, but so far I've been able to solder pretty much everything I've needed to. And I've also been able to do those track joints where they're soldering onto copper clad. So with this tip reviver, what I noticed was with these tips, I'm constantly filing the copper tip down to make it a bit finer, the way that it initially comes, very fine. But what would happen then is as soon as it gets hot, it starts to develop this black coating, which actually makes soldering quite hard because it's almost like an insulator. But with this, you just put your iron on it, and what it does is it actually coats the tip. And at the time I thought, Richard's trying to get me to buy more product, but once again it's proved invaluable. So coming back to the track, so I've got this stand here with a sponge that I wipe in between, generally in between doing something. So I've got a piece of track here. It's already cut. I've already sanded the back with a bit of fine sandpaper, so that when I do put the PVA on, it's got something to adhere to. I've also cut the track to length. I've also filed the ends to make sure that the fish plates all go on. And generally what I do when I'm fitting the track up, I'll use old fish plates, because when I actually, and obviously they become a bit looser, when I actually do join the track for the last time, if you like, I use a brand new fish plate to make sure that it's as tight as it can possibly be. And that's certainly assisted me. I do joints on bends and I've had no issue. So back to soldering, which Rob asked me to do. So the first thing is, with a dropper, I'm using very thin. I wouldn't know what it is, but it's pretty much the finest that you can get in your normal sort of shops that sell, electrical stuff. It's N gauge. If I was doing double O, I'm pretty sure I'd probably go to a thicker one, but the draw on the N gauge stuff is pretty fine. And I'm adding droppers into every single piece of track. So the first thing that I do, I should also point out that the solder I'm using is also DCC Concepts. Very fine, low melt solder. I've got a few of these. I've used 3 or 4 bundles of it. So the first thing that I do, you'll note this on this code 55, there are lots of little gaps, because that is the preferred way that they prefer you to bend the track. So it's a lot easier to bend it where the gaps are. So the first thing that you do is, and I've already done one here, so I actually was doing it on the video, but the battery went, so I've had to start all over again. So this is a bit like Blue Peter, one that I did earlier. But essentially what you're doing is, where the one gap is, you're just basically cutting away the webbing. I've got a scalpel here, and then you do the same the other side. So when you've done that, you come then to your flux. I'm using a brush with this. I'll just brush a little bit on. Now this wire I've already pre-tinned, but I'll just show you. I mean, you can use the what's the name, helpful hands, but essentially I'm just going to show you what I do is just tin that wire like so. So that's the wire ready to go. Now in here, now this is where the finer the tip, the better, but I'm just going to put some solder actually right there on the track, so you can see there's quite a nice blob just gone on. I'll come back and do this side again. Hope you can see that. Now obviously the longer you leave it, the more chance you've got of it melting some of the webbing. So what I'll do now is I'll just come back with that bit of flux. Now I've got my dropper wire. Now I know that on the left hand side is my red wire. So that then means when I turn it over, it's going to be on the opposite side. So what I do now is, this wire is obviously what I've tinned is a bit long, so you can do a couple of things here. I will firstly just bend this into about a 90 degree like so. I'll then come back and trim that. So now I've got like a dog leg. So what I'm going to now do is I'm just going to hold that right there, touch the soldering iron, make sure I've got a good and there we go. So before I do anything else, I check that is pretty strong. So then I'll go back, do the other side. Obviously what I'm doing is I'm trying to put the droppers about halfway on each piece of track. I then will mark where, and I've obviously checked on the layout to make sure there's no piers in the way, there's no you know, anything under the board that's going to get in the way. Then I'll come along, mark with a pencil on the cork, drill 2 holes, feed the droppers through, put the glue, some on the cork and obviously on the track webbing. I'll have the sleepers, these sleepers that are the ones that you buy that I talked about, already sat there, the 2 fish plates already attached, and then I basically put the wires through and slide the track in, make sure it's all joined right, and then generally hold it down with little clamps or weights. I use a fair few of these clamps, they're not too bad. You obviously you know, you can hold it on a curved section, and then I just weight it down. So that's pretty much it. So I would not consider myself a soldering expert, but I did get some good advice early, and touch wood, everything's been great. So Rob, it's not a hard thing to do. It's like all this, the more practice, the better you get. Get the right materials, and then just keep, once you've worked out the process, don't take any shortcuts, just keep doing it. So that's it. Thanks a lot, and hopefully next time we'll have trains running. Bye.